I'll never forget the look on my wife's face when we walked into that family reunion. We were about 15 minutes late because she took forever getting ready, which looking back now makes a lot more sense. My sister had been telling everyone about her new boyfriend for months, how great he was, how successful, how she finally found a good one. None of us had met him yet, and she was so excited to introduce him to the whole family. We walked through the front door of my parents' house, and I saw my sister standing in the living room holding hands with some guy. I looked over at my wife to say something, and her face was completely white. I'm talking pale, like she'd just seen a ghost standing in my mother's living room. And she had, in a way, because standing there holding my sister's hand was the man my wife had been sleeping with for the past 4 months. I didn't know that yet, but I was about to find out in front of my entire family. This story gets a lot worse before it gets better. My wife and I had been married for 11 years when all this happened. We lived in Westchester County, just north of the city, in a house we bought about 6 years into the marriage. I work in finance, specifically investment management for a firm in Manhattan, and I've done pretty well for myself over the years. We had a nice life with a solid 401k, a brokerage account I'd been building since my 20s, and I just started looking into rental properties as a way to diversify. My wife worked in pharmaceutical sales, which meant she traveled a lot for work and made good money doing it. Between the two of us, we were pulling in close to $400,000 a year, which in New York isn't as crazy as it sounds, but still put us in a comfortable spot. No kids, which was a decision we made early on because we both wanted to focus on our careers. Looking back, I'm grateful we never brought children into this mess. The signs were there for months, but I was too busy with work to notice them. My wife started going to the gym a lot more than usual, which I thought was a good thing at first. She bought new clothes, changed her hair color and style, and started experimenting with new perfume. Classic stuff that you read about online and think you'd catch immediately if it happened to you. But when you're in it, when you trust someone, you don't see what's right in front of your face. She also started being weird about her phone. It wasn't accessible as it used to be. I asked her about it once and she said it was work stuff, some new medical compliance thing about client information. I believed her because why wouldn't I believe my wife of 11 years? The other thing I noticed was that she seemed distant when we were together, but happy when she was leaving, like she couldn't wait to get out of the house, but she would drag her feet coming home. That should have been my biggest clue, but I told myself she was just stressed from work. Meanwhile, my sister had been telling the whole family about this amazing new guy she's been seeing. She's 3 years younger than me, never had great luck with relationships, so everyone was thrilled she'd finally found someone. She said he worked in medical device sales, made great money, drove a nice car, and treated her like a queen. My mom was already talking about grandkids, even though they'd only been together a few months. Every time I talked to my sister, she'd go on and on about how perfect this guy was. The one thing that was strange was that she never posted any pictures of him on social media. She said he was private and didn't like being on the internet, which seemed reasonable enough. What I didn't know was that he had a very good reason for staying off social media. He was playing my sister and my wife at the same time, and the last thing he needed was for either of them to see a picture and connect the dots. My parents throw a big family reunion at their house every summer. Been doing it for as long as I can remember. Aunts, uncles, cousins, the whole extended family shows up for a big cookout in the backyard. This particular year, my sister announced she was bringing her new boyfriend to finally meet everyone. She was nervous about it, kept texting me asking if I thought the family would like him. I told her not to worry, that we'd all be nice, and that I was looking forward to meeting the guy who finally made her happy. My wife, on the other hand, seemed weird about the whole thing leading up to it. She kept saying she wasn't feeling well, that maybe we should skip it this year. I told her we couldn't miss it because my sister was introducing her boyfriend and it would look bad if we didn't show up. She finally agreed but took forever getting ready, which made us late. I think she was hoping he'd already be gone by the time we got there, or maybe she was just trying to delay the inevitable. We walked through the front door, and the first thing I saw was my sister standing in the living room with her arm around some guy. She had this huge smile on her face, clearly so proud to show him off to everyone. I turned to say something to my wife, and that's when I saw her face. She looked like she was about to pass out right there in my parents' foyer. All the color had drained from her cheeks, and she grabbed my arm like she needed to steady herself. I asked her if she was okay, and she said she just felt dizzy, probably the heat. But I looked at the guy my sister was holding on to, and he had the exact same look on his face, pure terror, like he just walked into his worst nightmare. And the way they were looking at each other, my wife and this stranger, it wasn't how two people look at each other when they've never met. It was how two people look at each other when they've been caught doing something they shouldn't have been doing. In that moment, standing in my parents' living room with my whole family around, I knew. I didn't have proof yet, but deep in my gut, I absolutely knew. My sister came bouncing over to introduce us, completely oblivious to what was happening. She grabbed his hand and pulled him toward us with this big smile and said, "This is him. This is the guy I've been telling you about." He stuck out his hand to shake mine, and I swear it was trembling. I shook it, but I didn't say anything, just stared at him while my brain tried to process what was happening. Then my sister turned to my wife and said, "And this is my brother's wife," like they'd never met. My wife stuck out her hand and said, "Nice to meet you," in this shaky voice that told me everything I needed to know. They absolutely knew each other, and they were both pretending they didn't. I pulled my wife aside and asked her point blank if she knew that guy. She said no, she'd never seen him before. Why would I ask that? I told her she looked like she'd seen a ghost when we walked in, and she said it was just the heat making her feel sick. I let it go for the moment because I didn't want to cause a scene at my parents' house, but I watched them the entire time we were there, and they wouldn't even look at each other. When you're at a party, you naturally make eye contact with people. It's just what humans do. These two were actively avoiding each other's gaze like their lives depended on it. That night after we got home, I waited until my wife went to bed, and then I started digging. I'm not proud of what I did, but I needed to know the truth. I went through our credit card statements online and found charges at all these different hotels. Nice ones too, $200 and $300 a night, always on days when she said she was traveling for work. I cross-referenced them with her work calendar that she shared with me, and the cities didn't match up. She'd tell me she was going to Boston for a conference, but the hotel charge was in Manhattan. Tell me she was in Philadelphia for client meetings, but the charge was at a hotel 20 minutes from our house. I also found charges at restaurants I'd never been to, jewelry stores, fancy dinners that she never mentioned to me. Our joint account was bleeding money on this affair, and I had no idea. I printed everything out and put it in a folder because I knew I was going to need this later. The hardest part of all this wasn't dealing with my wife's betrayal. It was having to tell my little sister that her perfect new boyfriend was also sleeping with her sister-in-law. I called her the next day and asked her to meet me for coffee, said I needed to talk to her about something important. She showed up all excited, probably thinking I was going to tell her how much I liked her boyfriend. I sat her down and told her what I suspected, and I'll never forget the look on her face. She went from confused to angry to devastated in about 30 seconds. At first, she didn't believe me, said I must be wrong, said there was no way. So I showed her the credit card statements, the hotel charges, the restaurant receipts, and then I showed her something that made it impossible to deny. One of the jewelry store charges matched a necklace my wife had been wearing, and my sister recognized it immediately because her boyfriend had given her the exact same one. This guy was buying the same jewelry for both women, probably because he couldn't remember who he gave what to. My sister broke down crying right there in the coffee shop, and I just held her while she processed it all. My sister and I came up with a plan to catch them together. She told her boyfriend she was going out of town for a work trip, which she knew would give him the green light to see my wife. I told my wife I had a conference in Chicago and would be gone for the whole weekend. I could see her trying not to smile when I told her, which made me sick to my stomach. That weekend, my sister and I staked out our own house like we were private investigators or something. Sure enough, around 7 that night, his car pulled into my driveway. My wife opened the door and practically jumped into his arms right there on the front porch. My sister was recording everything from the car, and I could hear her crying quietly while she held the phone up. We sat there for about 2 hours until we decided we had enough evidence. Then we walked up to the front door of my own house and let ourselves in. They were on the couch in the living room, and the look on their faces when we walked in is something I'll remember forever. My wife actually tried to say it wasn't what it looked like, which would have been funny if it wasn't so pathetic. I told her to save it and that my lawyer would be in touch. I filed for divorce the following week and hired one of the best divorce attorneys in Westchester County. He wasn't cheap, but when you've got assets to protect, you don't cut corners on legal representation. Here's something most people don't know about New York divorce law. Even though New York allows no-fault divorce now, adultery is still a valid ground under Domestic Relations Law Section 170. And while New York courts don't usually consider fault when dividing property, there's a big exception for what they call wasteful dissipation of marital assets. All those hotel rooms, the jewelry, the fancy dinners, that was marital money she was spending on her affair. My attorney recommended bringing in a forensic accountant to trace exactly how much of our money went to funding her little romance. When we added it all up, she had spent over $40,000 on this affair over 4 months. Hotels, gifts, trips, dinners, all of it coming out of our accounts and marital funds. The forensic accountant documented every single charge and created a report that showed exactly where the money went. New York is an equitable distribution state, which means assets get divided fairly, but not necessarily 50-50. My attorney argued that the $40,000 she wasted on the affair should come out of her share of the marital assets. We had a lot to divide: the house in Westchester, my 401k, which had about $600,000 in it, her retirement accounts, the brokerage account, everything. She wanted spousal maintenance, which is what they call alimony in New York, arguing that I made more than her. My attorney pointed out that New York courts can consider marital fault in maintenance decisions when the conduct is egregious. Sleeping with your husband's sister's boyfriend while spending 40 grand of marital money definitely qualifies as egregious. We also brought up the fact that she had intentionally hidden the affair, lied about her whereabouts, and showed no remorse when confronted. The judge wasn't impressed with her behavior, and it showed in the final ruling. The divorce was finalized about 8 months after I filed, which is actually pretty fast for New York. The judge ruled that the $40,000 in marital waste would be deducted from her share of the equitable distribution. She got a smaller portion of the house equity and less of the retirement accounts because of her conduct. Her request for spousal maintenance was denied because of the egregious nature of the affair and the financial damage she caused. I also made sure to change the beneficiary on my life insurance policy before everything was finalized, something my attorney reminded me to do early on. A lot of people forget about that stuff during a divorce and end up leaving their ex as the beneficiary on their policies. I wasn't about to make that mistake after everything she put me through. In the end, I kept the house, most of my 401k, and my sanity. She walked away with a lot less than she expected and a reputation that followed her everywhere in our social circle. The affair partner tried to salvage things with my sister after everything came out, which was honestly pathetic to watch. He showed up at her apartment with flowers, trying to explain that it was complicated, that he had feelings for both of them. My sister told him to get lost, and that if she ever saw him again, she'd file for a restraining order. He also lost his job when word got around about what he'd done, because he worked in medical sales and his company didn't want that kind of scandal attached to their name. Last I heard, he moved out of state and was trying to start over somewhere nobody knew him. Good luck with that, because the internet is forever and people talk. My ex-wife tried to blame me for the affair after the divorce was final, told mutual friends I was never around and she was lonely. That excuse might have worked if she hadn't been caught sleeping with her sister-in-law's boyfriend. Nobody bought it, and most of our friends sided with me when they heard the full story. She eventually moved back in with her parents because she couldn't afford an apartment on her own after the settlement. Went from a nice house in Westchester to her childhood bedroom in her 50s. That's what happens when you blow up your entire life for someone who was playing you the whole time. My sister took it hard at first, which was understandable. She'd finally thought she found the one, and it turned out he was a complete fraud who was using her the whole time. But she's doing a lot better now, went to therapy, worked through her trust issues, and started dating again about a year later. She actually just got engaged to a guy she met through a mutual friend, and this time she made sure to do her homework first. We joke now that at least we went through it together, which isn't really funny, but it helps us cope. She's my best friend now, in a way she wasn't before, because nothing bonds people like shared trauma. As for me, I'm in a much better place than I was 2 years ago. I kept the house, kept building my investment portfolio, and actually ended up buying that rental property I'd been looking at before everything fell apart. It's funny how losing someone who doesn't deserve you can actually be the best thing that ever happens. I'm not dating anyone seriously right now, and I'm okay with that. I spent 11 years with someone who was lying to my face, so I'm taking my time before I trust anyone like that again. But I'm happy, genuinely happy, for the first time in longer than I can remember. Here's what I learned from all of this. Trust your gut, because if something feels off, it probably is. Document everything, because you never know when you're going to need proof of what really happened. And get a good attorney, especially if you've got assets to protect, because divorce law is complicated and you need someone who knows what they're doing. The truth always comes out eventually, sometimes in the most unexpected ways. Mine came out at a family reunion when my wife locked eyes with my sister's boyfriend, and both their faces told me everything I needed to know. If you're going through something like this, just know that it gets better. It may take some time, but it does get better. The pain doesn't last forever, and the person who betrayed you will have to live with what they did for the rest of their life. That's not karma. That's just consequences doing its job, and consequences always catch up eventually. And thank you, Tony, for your channel. When I first started listening to stories like this, I was listening to maybe 5 channels. When I came across yours, I was hooked. You have one of the best voices on this platform for stories. Those other channels, I stopped listening to them because they couldn't compete. And I love how you can slightly hear the music. That lets me know you know what you are doing. And I absolutely love the way you put trolls in their place. Just like you said, it's your channel and your show. If they don't like it, get the fuck out. I love it. And the greatest thing is, you are not AI. You are real. Keep up the good work, brother.